And we got 2 people out today, so they can view the recording and remote in and catch up. We have server 1 and server 2 set up from Friday. And we're going to finish our Active Directory setup. Let's check out server 1. PM server 1, connect to it.
Should I have a sync OS 7 Murphy?
Probably not.
Okay.
Maybe. It's not. It's another class. Yes, it should be there. It's not yours. You're not Murphy. He walks around in a robot suit and helps the police force. RoboCop. RoboCop. His name's Murphy.
RoboCop shot that dude.
Pass 1, 2, 3, 4 with capital P.
Yep. So this will have to be all caps.
No. So you're logging in as administrator. And then pass 1, 2, 3, 4 into server 1. Let me look at what you're attempting to do. It looks like you're attempting. Yeah, you're not typing administrator.
Spell administrator.
You can't. It's on the screen, so you can look at that. There you go. Now pass 1, 2, 3, 4.
I swear last time we typed in
All right. So as we get logged in, I want to investigate in Server Manager under the Tools menu, the Active Directory users and computers. Sure, yep, it's recording. We launch Active Directory users and computers. We deployed out Contoso on Friday, and it's still there. Hopefully, it's still there. You may have to expand Contoso out to see everything. You may look something like that, but expanding it out. Clicking on users. We need to fix something because whoever designed the password expiration policy in Microsoft Server was a fan of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the, it answered everything, the life of the universe, the ultimate question is 42. So when he was coding the default password expiration policy, he didn't know what to put. He just put 42 because that's the answer to everything. So in 42 days, that's getting close to about midterm when you have a skills test. And if you change your password, I can't log in to grade it. That's not very cool. We can fix that problem by finding the administrator account. There's currently only one account in the entire domain. That's the administrator account. If you double click on the administrator account under users, you will be able to look at his properties. You can also right click and go to properties. What is Jacoby looking at? Where is he at?
Oh, I can, that's crazy.
Oh.
I just realized it.
He was under like domains and trust or something. It's Active Directory users and computers under the tools menu. There you go. That's better. Is it weird? Watching a computer?
Are you controlling it?
No, that's Jacoby.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's crazy.
What's up there right now?
Yep.
I just realized that.
And that one to your right, Sabrina's controlling it.
Oh, my goodness. How freaky.
You're surrounded by bots.
What's new?
Okay, we won't call them bots. They're actually people. Jacoby says he's a ghost. Find the account tab. They shuffle around. One student pointed out, why does the rows like jump different? Why does it reorganize when you click on stuff? I don't know. That is annoying after he pointed that out. So finding the account tab, and this is where you control the account, is on the account tab. We don't want the user to change the password, and we don't want the password to ever expire. Those both need to be typically checked. If user can't change password, then password never expires, need to be checked. You can just check password never expires and let them change passwords when they want to. I want to go ahead and lock the administrator account. It's worded it only has pass 1, 2, 3, 4, and nobody can accidentally change it without going into here and taking these checkboxes off, or at least the top one. And that also overrides the 42-day password expiration. So just some maintenance that we needed to do to take care of defaults that Microsoft does. You can go in and click OK. That's the only thing we needed to do for that. Just we could have went and changed the global password policy. I don't want to get into that yet. That's like chapter 8 stuff. Sweet. Checking under domain controllers. I see I have server 1. We promoted it to an Active Directory domain controller. It's now running a SQL database that houses the administrator accounts, some built-in groups. Of course, you would want to add more servers and computers to network. Wouldn't just want a plain domain controller by itself. What's the point? Its main purpose in life is to control client machines, Windows 10, Windows 11, and other servers. Still have, yep, I got my colors in here. You'll notice the domain container right here, contoso.com, symbolized by 3 servers up there. There's multiple servers. It's best practice to have a minimum of 2 servers in case one's being rebooted or one dies. The other server still has a copy of Active Directory and people could still participate in the client server network. Well, here they showed 3 just to key you in. Hey, you need a cluster of servers to run this domain. There's some other things to look at here. You'll see some just plain folders. Those are called container objects, those right there. Container objects. They're built in. There's not a lot of administrative control you can do with objects in there. You'd think you'd want to put users under users, but no, you don't. You want to create something called an organizational unit, and it looks kind of like this folder right here, what domain controllers is in. Notice it's a little bit different. It's got an extra little side folder on the side of the folder. You can apply policies and configuration controlling settings to folders like that, and they're called organizational units. So as we start expanding out Contoso, we'll create our own folders that are organizational units that has that extra symbol on the side to put computers and servers and users and stuff in. And I'll talk about that when we get to that point. We'll likely get to the point where we have an extra server and maybe put a placeholder for a Windows client machines today. Okay, server 1's looking pretty good. Let's check the IP addressing because normally the promotion wizard messes up the DNS a little bit. Let's go to local server. That's the easiest way because it's all quick hyperlinks. We want to check our Ethernet adapter settings. So it hyperlinks directly to the Ethernet adapter. We're going for our TCP/IP settings. Properties, TCP/IP version 4, properties. And it's not really messed up. I mean, 127.0.0.1 is pointing back to myself, back to the server one, which is a DNS that works. But I like to be a little more specific and go ahead and change it 192.168.6.1. Make sure it's pointing to itself. And server 2 is going to become a backup DNS and a backup domain controller. I'll go ahead and put its address in for when we get it promoted. The server will realize that it's also a DNS system. Any other tablets, phones, laptops, PCs that participate in the contessa.com network would have to have these two addresses for their DNS. Their IP address would, of course, have to be something different, 6.30, 6.100, something like that. But all of the DNS has to be the same. And that seems to be a hard concept for a lot of IT personnel to grasp. Worked with so many IT personnel, taught students that had no clue. You know, DNS just takes the name and translates it into an IP. Computers don't know how to get to that server and look up names, have a bad experience. You don't want to browse the internet just by having IP addresses memorized in your head. Most people don't. I met one student that memorized numbers better than anything, so we called him Rain Man. He could subnet mask, he could convert like 4 or 5 digit hex back to decimal, back to binary in his head without just spew it out. Crazy. Okay, we got that all set. Let's go ahead and okay, close out the TCP/IP. Let's move over to server 2 and let's go ahead and bring it up as a domain controller. So I can go ahead and close server 1 for now and bring up server 2. So Jacoby needs to pin his Hyper-V manager. Into his system. Okay, I'm going to check the IPs. Pretty sure, well, yeah, I'm going to go and set the DNS settings on it too. They may or may not be correct. Looks like the secondary is not in place. I'm going to go ahead and add that in. That way it makes it just like server 1.
Oh, not one by one.
And then go ahead and just okay and close out when you've got those set. You can just get back to the local server page. Oh, he's on server 1. Okay, Jacoby, at the top of your screen, there's a little bitty blue bar that you can just hit the X on, top center. There you go. Now you can connect to server 2. Yeah, when you maximize the window, we can always hit that. Okay, so I'm going to okay these addresses. They're just the same as server 1. At this point, I could just go ahead and promote it to domain controller, but I want to join it to the domain first, just to make sure there's that two-way communication and that I can access the administrator accounts in contessa.com before I move forward. If not, the dialog box wizard that I run will ask a few more questions if I don't pre-join it. Plus, it kind of helps me show another point that when you join client machines into your domain, what happens at login. At this point, I'm going to come up here. We see the computer name and we see the work group. Either link takes us to the exact same dialog box. So it doesn't really matter which one you click on, but I need to move it off of work group and I want to join Contoso. Clicking the link, notice system properties, the computer description. Somebody had pointed out you have to hit change button because that's not the computer name when we were changing the computer name. Also under this change button is the ability to change from a work group to a domain, a client server network. That's what we want to do. We want to change it to domain in contoso.com. Children's Hospital every 5 years swaps computers out. So they have, computers under warranty and less hardware issues and don't need a PC going out while they're in the clinic with the patient. So yeah, they come in from Dell and you cart them over into a staging area, desk with like 5 hookups and monitors. And typically, well, they had like 3 different stations, each with 4 hookups so that each temp person could stage 4 computers, unbox it, give it a computer name, join it to the Children's Hospital network, reboot the machine. You got to touch every single machine. Then you got to cart them around and go swap the machines out. It's a lot of walking around, especially when it's 36 square blocks of buildings. So I'm going to hit OK. Contoso.com. We need a domain username and password. I already typed the domain name, so I don't need to include it. It knows I'm connecting to Contoso. Somebody's got permission to join. There's only one account, administrator. And that pass 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mini straightforward. Since obviously I want this.
So click OK. So yeah, Jacoby, your screen is just maximizing is all it's doing. If you get an error, maybe you mistyped Contoso, read what the error says. Maybe you mistyped the DNS settings, but it should have said welcome, and then you just go ahead and restart. Let's check out Jacoby's screen, see what's going on. 192.168.6.1 and then 6.2. There you go. Once they're both running, it won't really matter which one's on top and bottom. But for now it does, because server 2 is not a domain controller yet.
I didn't restart.
When it's asked you to restart, yes, but it'll ask you when you hit OK out of the dialog boxes. I don't think you finished OKing out of all your dialog boxes. I think you got one more close or OK button to hit. Yay. Okay, Jacoby's got it. You'll OK out of all of those and it'll ask you to restart. Click the restart button when you get to that point. Dakota, what's yours doing? Yeah, check your TCP IP. Make sure the 192.168.6.1, 192.6.8.6.2. That looks good. Oh, what your address at the top? We got 195. Should be 192. Glad I seen that. That's hard to see. Also, careful about hitting those X buttons on the IP addresses. Sometimes it will cancel. Now I want to go double check, make sure it took that. So I still see that 195. I've seen it cancel changes. Okay, it's 192. But I've always used the OK buttons all the way out of networking because I've seen that last exit cancel all of my changes before. Oh no, we've seen this password.
Oh, wait, oh, I got one.
Now we know it's all pass 1, 2, 3, 4, just like it's supposed to be. Yay. So yeah. Okay, hit all the OK buttons and close, and then restart. Yep. Before you log into server 2, if you've already logged back into server 2, you need to log out. You didn't log in correctly, likely. Likely you didn't log in correctly. You may have been smart enough, but probably not. This is another annoying thing that you run into when you're an IT person deploying out new machines. Is once you've joined the domain and you restart, it's showing the last account that you logged into, which was a local account on that PC or that Windows 10 machine, not an account in the domain. Now, if you booted up and you got to this point and you type pass 1, 2, 3, 4, you still logged into the local server 2, not into Contoso. So you don't have credentials to do any type of promotion or any type of administration task inside of the domain. You'd have to click other user. Yours may have just come up to other user. The last class, everybody's came up to other user and it didn't have administrator. Not real sure what that was about, but at this point in time, I can type in a new account and I can see underneath the password field, it says sign into Contoso. But if I type administrator and I look at what happens to the sign into field, I need to pay real close attention. This happens on Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows 11. It's a little bit annoying, but type administrator, what happens? It switches to server 2. There's a security principle called principle of least privilege, saying you should always log into the domain as a non-administrative account and only right click and run as administrator on the tools you need to. I believe that's why they defaulted it to this, to stop you from being able to log in to a domain administrator. But we got to do a lot of work in the lab to set this machine up, and I want to be a domain administrator and kind of break my security protocol. So log into Contoso, I have to fill out an email address style login at contoso.com to get it to sign into contoso.com. But that always trips people up because it's what happens when you join a computer. You tries to get you to go back in as local account. You could do it the legacy way of Contoso WAC administrator, but it's better to use the more modern this century login because the people that you're going to be helping are not IT people. They'll understand email address, use your email address to log in. They're not going to understand domain, WAC, username. So it's just easier to communicate it this way to them. So go ahead and log in. And did Sabrina somehow log out of her PC? So remote PC should have a button, like a menu at the top that you can send Control Alt Delete. There you go. You can log back in. The remote PC is supposed to have that somewhere, drop down menu that you can log back in. So I've logged into server 2 into the domain. I'm not a domain controller yet, but I can control the domain controller. Mostly just waiting on Sabrina to get back into server 2. But I can launch Active Directory users and computers. Look, Contoso. Oh, server 2 is under computers now. Look at that. Server 1 is still a domain controller. I can even install this tool on Windows 10 and launch it from a Windows 10 and control the network as long as I'm logged in as a Contoso administrative account. So that's kind of your centralized management. You don't have to sit at the server to do work. Most servers are deployed without a graphical interface anyway, so you wouldn't be sitting there doing anything at a command prompt. At this point of the lab, our goal is to make server 2 a domain controller. We've successfully logged in, we've successfully connected to Contoso. There's a full two-way communication between the current domain controller and this one. So now we can add this as a peer, a backup, load balancing controller, whatever you want to call it. Do you remember how to do that? How did we add the first server as a domain controller? And click the little exclamation point in Server Manager. And we launched the promote this server to a domain controller wizard. Go ahead and do that on server 2. So because we logged in as administrator at contoso.com, this dialog box pops up with things already filled out. We talked last week on Friday that add a domain controller to an existing domain is the most common step that you do. And that's what we're going to do today. We're adding this domain controller to contoso.com. If you didn't log in as a domain account, you would have to fill out the domain information and you'd have to provide the administrator at contoso.com credentials to go past this point. But everything's filled out because we logged in as an administrator account. So we can just go next without making any changes. Unless you logged in wrong, then you have to fill this stuff out. Click next. The last time we got to this one, when we were creating the forest, we didn't have anything that we could change. It was all grayed out, and all we could do is put in a password for disaster recovery. This time, however, I noticed there's a couple of checks up here that I can make changes to. And I do. I want to uncheck this global catalog. We'll explain about what that purpose is later today, but I'll go ahead and explain about what a global catalog is. So if you ever studied in history class about a thing called a phone book, you can open it up and look up people's first and last names, and sometimes they'll have their address out beside it. Sometimes they'll just have their phone number, but you don't know anything else about them. You don't know if what race they are. You don't know how old they are or anything. It just shows their name, maybe address, and phone number. And you can call and get more information. Sort of what a global catalog is. You can have multiple domains and trees in your forest. And instead of all the domain controllers having to have all of the information about every single object, they simply just have a name and where they're located. And that the global catalog keeps track of that. So if you're searching for an account or something and looking up properties of it, once you find that account, it basically makes that phone call in the background and pulls all the information from the actual server. So that's its purpose. And the purposes of unchecking that we'll come to later. Server 1 is a global catalog. You have to have one running on your network. But we're leaving this off of server 2 for something later. Let's put pass1234 as our recovery mode password. Remember I said you'd save this in a fireproof safe somewhere if you ever had to boot up and access the C drive without the Windows being able to boot by itself. So Sabrina, it's administrator at contoso.com. This is the credentials. Just like an email address. And you kind of equate that to, don't you log into these computers with your email address and password? You could shorten it. You could put asub/ your username, first name dot last name, and log in that way.
Really?
Yeah. I think y'all are in, maybe y'all are in the Vanguard domain. No, y'all are in the edu domain. Just the PCs are moved over. So Sabrina, it's collecting info right there. You just said awaiting state. Now you can put the password in and uncheck global. Yeah. Okay, I've got the password. I'm gonna just, there's nothing really left to change. I think we're just pretty much next all the way through for the rest of the questions. It'll do a prerequisite. Hopefully there's no red showstoppers.
I have a delegation to these.
Yeah, all the yellow warnings are okay. There's nothing that would stop us from installing. Those are expected because we're an isolated network. I'm just going to click install. It's going to automatically install and restart the server. So it'd be a good time to go ahead and take a 10-minute break right now. It won't take 10 minutes, but by the time we get back from break, it'll be restarted and it will be a domain controller. So I'm going to pause recording. Hopefully I'll remember to start the recording when I come back. Server 2's come up. At this point, you can't log into the local anymore because it is a domain controller. We'll go ahead and log in.
So you're telling me we can do Contoso?
Actually, now it doesn't really matter. Administrator is going to log into Contoso no matter what. There's not a local. Because the local account's been removed. I can show you that. Just bringing up computer management. I'll notice that local users and groups is gone off of the system once it was promoted. Well, server 2 is a domain controller. At this point, I'm just going to leave server 2. I'm just going to close it out because once it's a domain controller, I can control most everything else. I could have even promoted it from the other server. I think. No, couldn't have. I think you have to be actually on it. But no, probably not. I could have done it from the other server. From here on out, we don't really need to touch server 2 anymore. So I just close the window out. I'm going to go connect into server 1 just to show off some centralized management stuff. So we'll log into server 1 or back into server 1. Then go ahead and start your Active Directory users and computers on server 1. It's always like the 5th one down, I think. Yeah. The bottom Active Directory tool. If you navigate to the domain controller's organizational units, you may see server 2 in there. You might have to hit the F5 key on the keyboard to refresh. There's also a little green circling arrow for refresh there, but I typically use keyboard F5 as a universal refresh button. If I check computers, server 2 is no longer there like it was before because it automatically moved to domain controllers. I can see server 1 is abbreviated up here, GC. It's running global catalog service. So that's a domain controller with global catalog. And if you just see DC, it's just the domain controller without running a global catalog. That's what that stands for. Well, neat. Now I want to talk about some advanced engineering stuff, high level, high paying. You know, setting up a forest is normally really high paying because that's just not something normally done. That's you're designing an entire network for a whole new company. So it's pretty easy, but if you haven't done all these steps and talked about it, you can really screw it up and have long-term management issues. One of the management issues you might run into long-term is something called master operation roles. Right now, server 1 is running all 5 master operation roles. Now, server 2 has a copy of everything server 1 does, but it's just not, it's not the authority for certain things. Whenever you create a new domain or a new tree into the network, one of the servers, you got to have one person that knows what's already existing in case somebody gets a work order and another junior admin gets a work order and says, hey, we need to create support.contoso.com. And they both click and install a new server, and they both click to promote and add it as a new domain called support.contoso.com at the same time. If that happens, you could have a really messed up network because you'd have 2 domains called support.contoso.com, but they would have a different ID number behind them, something called a global unique identifier, a thing where we did the generalized assist prep. I know we've not actually seen this, just this big, huge, long 128-bit, ugly looking number that's actually behind everything you create. So which one's the real one? So that's a big problem. So there's certain things like adding a domain into the network where you need to make sure there's only one server that you can go up and ask and go, hey, I want to create support.contoso.com. And if somebody else did that, they'd also have to communicate with server 1 and say, hey, I want to create support. And it would sit there and say no to one of them and yes to the other. So it wouldn't allow two to be created accidentally. Because once you create a new domain, it takes a while before all the other computers learn of it. It's got to be replicated, information passed along. So that's what master operation roles are for. Now, creating user accounts is a little bit different. We have two domain controllers up here, server 1 and server 2. Server 1's the master, but even if it's offline, we can still create user accounts because server 2, Microsoft was really smart. They allowed all the extra domain controllers, it's not the master, to have a range of addresses that are just for them for creating group accounts and user accounts and other things, just in case the server is being restarted because of Windows updates or something. They have this range and they can continue creating user accounts and know that they're not going to create a duplicate because their little block they were given just for server 2 to pull from can't be replicated. If you remember check writing, nobody writes checks anymore, but once you get close to the end of your checkbook, your checks are numbered, maybe you're getting close to check number 500, you're on like 478. So you order more checks from your bank. Your bank's kept track and they'll start check 501 to 1000 or whatever, send you a box of 500 checks. That's sort of what these servers do. When server 2 gets close to the end of its book of checks, then server 1 will give it another block, and it might not be from 501 to 1000 because server 8 may have gotten that block. It may give you like 2500 to 3000 the next time. So that's what these master operation roles are for. And they're all on server 1 right now. So that might not be a good thing. Server 1 might be a little bit more process intensive and overloaded since it's doing 5 things at once. What do we do with these roles? Well, me being an IT nerd, have read and knew about these roles over the past, just going over stuff, kept reading. Now, well, what's the best practice on them? And I come across a really cool site that I linked in under week 3. Jacoby's wanting me to control alt delete. So it says somewhere in your remote PC menu, there's a control alt delete to send. I don't remember exactly where it is, but there's an area you can right click up at the top and remote PC and send control alt delete.
Can we do it for him?
Yeah, I sent it. But I know it's there because I remote PC it and have to control alt delete and log in. There's like a little menu button in remote PC for that. I'll have to look that up, I guess, when I'm trying to remote PC. Okay, so where were we at? We're inside your course shell, inside of week 3. So you got to jump forward a week. Sol's blog here. It looks like he's from Germany, Dutch, something. I don't know, DK, Dutch maybe, whatever country code that is. But I stumbled across his blog years ago and was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense because I can read all of the Microsoft documentation and kind of like, they just tell you all the details, they didn't have best practice on how to do it. So he did a really good job of showing best practice. I've seen some other sites out there since he's wrote his up. They probably copied off of him. I think his is the best explanation and really coming down to just this part right here, just that section. You may want to read his whole page. And there's not a whole lot. It's just that. So at your leisure, you might want to jump to that page. But here we go. It's recommended to place the forest role on one domain controller and the domain roles on another server. If not all domain controllers are global catalog servers, it's important to place the infrastructure master on a server that's not running the global catalog server. That's why we unchecked it on server 2. Something the way that global catalog and infrastructure master can kind of does the same thing. And it just puts some extra load. So if it's not your policy to run global catalog on every single domain controller, then the one that's not running it should be the infrastructure master role. Cool. You can go read all the math and extra studies on that if you want to get really nerdy, and I'm not that nerdy. I was like, this works, and I'll take his word for it. So let's look at some of these. The forest roles are schema master and domain master. So that domain master is the one where that server has to be online before we can add a new tree or domain into a forest. That way you only have one server that guarantees that he knows every single request for making a new domain or forest. Then there's a schema master. If you've ever studied database or anything, you know, it's a bunch of tables like Excel spreadsheet. The schema master is basically just a structure, the table names and the column headings and stuff. If you screw with that, you typically mess up the whole entire application. In our case, the application's being Active Directory. So those two are pretty hard to find, especially the schema master. There's some command line stuff you got to type and bring up hidden tools and hold your tongue just right and transfer it to other servers. So but it's already on server 1 as the first server. We're going to leave it there and not worry about trying to move those. You would need to move it if you're upgrading from an old like 2008 server up to 2019. You're going to shut down the 2008, and it actually was the forest master server at the time. You need to do some Googling and figure out how to do that. It's pretty rare, not something you just have memorized. And I've been in networking before Active Directory, so I knew what it was before Active Directory. And Active Directory's been around for 23 years. So I know how to do it, but I'd still have to Google how to do the command line stuff to bring up the hidden tools. So we're going to leave those, but these others right here, these are domain level. They're easier to get to and migrate them. So the RID master, infrastructure master, and PD simulator should be on a second controller, and the infrastructure on the one without a global catalog. We've already preset that up. So if you want to do some more reading, cool little blog, maybe it makes sense. I know he stops at 2008, but Active Directory, these 5 roles, global catalog has been there from the beginning, and it's still there now in 2019. I'm not messed with 2022 server, but I guarantee it's in there too. So let's migrate. And we do that in Active Directory users and computers. Easy. It's not hidden. It's tools right here. We can move it from here. I'm going to move this over so I can see I'm connected to server 1. That's going to be important here in a second. To migrate those 3 roles to server 2, right-click on the domain, contoso.com, inside of your Active Directory users and computers. Go to Operation Masters. And you'll notice all 3 of those listed in this blog that needed to be moved is right here in this one dialog box. Problem though, if you're connected to server 1, which you likely are because you launched the tool on server 1, so it's probably since you're running it on that server, it's probably the fastest one to respond. Sometimes it'll click server 2. It's just whichever one responds first. We run into this little thing, Operation Master, server 1, okay? But I want to move it to server 2, but I can't type down here. Trick. I got to connect to server 2 to migrate it to server 2. But I want to do it without logging into server 2. Central administration, where I don't have to be on the server that I want to mess with. So I'm going to close this dialog box. And told you to move this little middle divider over, and you should probably have server 1 up there. If you say server 2, you're good. You can click the change button on all 3 and move across. But I can right click and change my domain controller that the tool's operating upon and pick another domain controller. In my case, I want to pick the one I want to move the master operation roles to, which is server 2. And I can also verify global catalog's not running on it. Click OK. If I go back to that Operation Master's dialog box, is it different this time? Well, this time server 1's the Operation Master, but it says I can hit the change button and change it to what's in this field, which is server 2. Change? Yes. Okay. Next tab for the PDC emulator. That's the timing. Click change and yes. And okay. Neat. And the last one takes a little bit longer for some reason. Not real sure why this one takes so long, because I've done it in a production environment. It's just as fast as the other 3. I don't know why in this lab environment when nothing else exists that it takes an extra amount of time, but it does. So. Yes, you want to change all 3 of them. And then you can finally, yes, okay. So they're now all changed. I mean, that's not going to affect anything for our little bitty network that we're playing in the lab. But I wanted you to go through the process of and looking at what a best practice is. And maybe not that you'll remember this when you get into the IT field, but other than you might remember there's some master roles that I need to look up. That link, Sol's blog, I would probably copy that and keep it just as a job feature cheat sheet. Like I said, that's considered pretty high level engineering, and likely you'll go work places that they don't have IT staff that know that much integrated into details on it. I want to talk about the PDC a little bit. Back in the olden days, before the turn of the century, before 1999, we didn't have Active Directory. You still had a domain, but you had one primary domain controller that you had to connect to that add user accounts and change passwords and do anything. And then you had backups. They were read-only. They could answer queries and stuff, but no changes could be made on it. So when the PDC was down for patches or down for something, nobody could change the password, nobody could add a user account, nobody could delete a user account. You couldn't do anything. Now it's a little bit different. The servers replicate everything between each other, so you can connect to any server because they've got those ranges of numbers, so you can add accounts and stuff. And you can change your password and it'll send a update token to all the other servers. They also include a sequence number so that they can keep track of which packet is the newest packet that has the latest information in it. And they all replicate to each other. If one of these master operation role servers goes down permanently, you can tell one of the other servers to become the master operation role and force it. There may be some errors like, hey, I can't communicate to server 2 to verify it's being transferred, and you'll get an extra click that you can say, yes, the other server is never coming back online. So it won't try to become a master if it turns back on. And hopefully you can't bring that one back on anymore if you do that. But now the PDC, since we don't have the old pre-2000 clients in the world anymore, I hope you don't run into a company running 1990 something technology. Its main role now is timing. It keeps all the clients and all the servers in the same time. There's some security that's run for logging in that you can't be more than 5 minutes off, otherwise you can't log in to the domain. That's the default settings anyway. So it's really important that every single computer that's connected into Contoso knows what time it is. That's what that one server is doing. More info than you need to know probably, but hey, there you go. Will you forget it by next week? Yeah, it's okay. At least I told you. Maybe it's in the back of your brain somewhere, rattling around. You see it again, you're like, yeah, now I remember what that's about. Yes, we changed all three. You did something. You accomplished. You should feel very accomplished. They'd pay somebody like 6 figures to have that knowledge to do all of that.
Oh, wow.
Awesome stuff. If you go to a company and you notice you don't have one that's not running global catalog service and you want to move the infrastructure master to one of them, you could go to the properties, one of these servers, and there's an NTDS settings button. And there's a checkbox for global catalog. I don't want to uncheck that. I have to have a global catalog running. But it's as easy as unchecking a checkbox underneath the properties and NTDS settings of the server. And if you need to turn the global catalog on, like server 2, if we had a policy change and all the servers need to run global catalog, I could just put a checkbox, hit OK. It would start that service process up on that computer. I don't want to.
Why would you need a global phone?
I don't know. Just don't.
Okay. Because reason. Love my paper.
So, yeah, Jacoby, to make sure that you connected the server 2. And your operation master should all say server 2 now on all 3 tabs. In the top field anyway. I said if it's not gotten, it's not done, it's not going to affect anything in our lab. It's just showing you stuff that I really doubt test out's going to even explain. They do have chapter 7s over Active Directory and cover some things, but I don't remember them going quite that deep. I think they mentioned them, but I don't know that they explain how to separate them out, what the best practice is on it. Now, I told you that the ones with the little extra symbol on them is what you want, where you want to put people. So users looks like, hey, I'll put all my user accounts there. No, you can't push any extra configurations to them. So what you want to do, you need to design your domain where you create these folders, or organizational units is what they're called. They look like folders. See right there, it says organizational unit right here on that one. And the others are just container. So you don't have much control over the container objects, but you do over an organizational unit. So you create these organizational units, AKA folder looking things. How do you create them? Some companies create them based on geography, like room number, building, things like that. Some companies look at the organizational chart and break things up, like sales department and engineering department and create organizational units that way. Sometimes they combine the two, location and departments, or department and location inside. Like the National Guard would have probably 50 states listed out through there, and maybe Puerto Rico. And then inside of that, break down into different command or maybe even counties and stuff. So it's organized how that your company's going to organize it. And this is where it comes tricky. If you're engineering a new company out, you got to figure out what's going to make sense long-term. Is this company going to grow? You got to assume it's going to grow and get bigger. How would you design it out? This company went from 50 employees to 3,000 employees. What would make sense for other IT to come in later on 5 years down the road and keep expanding it out? So that can be based on industry, based on the culture of the IT that's working there. We are just going to create some simple folders here. We're going to create a folder for servers to go into and a folder for our PCs like a Windows 10. Click on Contesto. You can right click and go to new, or you can use the button bar up here and the little folder that looks like an organizational unit with a star on it. You can click it. Uh-oh. It says domain controller right there. I don't want to create it inside of that. Cancel. Why did it say domain controller? Because I got that highlighted. Yes, it's supposed to say contesto.com. I had to highlight it over here on this side. I had to get that unhighlighted. Yeah, it should just say contesto.com. I don't want it buried under another folder. We'll make this member servers, which is what a non-domain controller is called. It's part of domain. Microsoft calls them member servers. Just use their terminology for it. We will put out a third server here in just a little bit, and we'll want to move it there. I don't think we moved it there in the first class. I think we just, well, we didn't even make it we didn't connect it yet, that's why. And then I'm going to click Contesto again and make a new folder for workstations. Here on campus, they have something called endpoints, which means, computing devices. And inside of that, they break it down by building and room number. So they've got 2 or 3 folders deep. It's pretty easy. I can go to endpoints, I actually have us separate, just CSNT. I can click on us, and then it opens up and it shows 106, 104, 103. And I can find all the PCs in it really quickly. So it expands out, just like you'd use folders to organize your homework and stuff under documents folder. You organize users and PCs and other devices in Active Directory. When you first join a computer to network, it shows up under computers. And the best practice is, once it's in there, after you've joined it, to go to this and drag it to where it needs to go. IT here constantly email every month or two, and one of the main people looks at their computers and goes, why is there 300 computers in here? Somebody's not going in here and putting them in the right spot. So then they don't get the control delete policy set and the alert active shooter app and stuff that gets installed on these machines and different things. Virus definitions, they're not in the right spot.
Has there ever been an active shooter on the ACD?
No. We were the safest campus in the entire country for 3 years in a row. We've not got that lately, but they included things like theft and everything. So that was pretty cool. I've not heard that we've got that lately. I think there may have been a theft or two each year, which kind of cuts us off from like 0 thefts and 0 anything. May have been some John Deere students smoking pot or something that, but I just made fun of them. I'm not saying it was just them. I don't think they've had anything like that. Years ago, there was an incident, but I've not heard anything recently. All right, our server, our Active Directory is up and running. Sweet. I'm going to go ahead and close down my server 1. And I want to roll out a server 3. I want to roll out a command line only server. It's the recommended install for Microsoft, and about all of our domain controllers, except some old 2008 servers that really should have been gone a couple of years ago on our campus. They are all now all core only. It stops junior admins from logging in and installing apps and downloading drivers and junk on them that might have viruses. They get to the command prompt and go, oh, well, can't use this server, and move on. So it really helps with the security. Well, we're going to create a brand new virtual machine, and that's just new virtual machine. We can't clone, we'll have to install from scratch because I think only 2000 server had the capability to swap back and forth from a graphical interface without a graphical interface. They've stopped that since when I guess there's too much issues they had with that feature. So new virtual machine. We'll go next. We'll name it very similar. You can probably see the AM class up there. There's server 3. We're just PM LAN. The same naming convention used before for your server 1 and server 2, but PM LAN 1 last name and server 3. This will be just like a straight install like we did the very first time, connecting the DVD and everything to it. As we go next, what generation did we choose? 2. On the next page, we have memory. What did we do on memory? It was 4096, and my numlock key is off. It always does that when you swap virtual machine to virtual machine back to hosted. And we checked use dynamic memory. It's 4096 meg, use dynamic memory for this virtual machine. As we move forward, do you remember what network connection we had? Internal, good. As we move forward, we're setting up a hard drive. We don't need quite as big this time. I'm going to go down with just 30 gig on the core. And then that best practice is to store everything on a second hard drive anyway. So as we add anything extra to the server, we'll add another hard drive later on. And as we go next, the installation options, we want to install from the SW DVD9 ISO image. So click the radio button to install an operating system. Browse to your C ISO folder. And do you remember the SW DVD9 Wins Server Standard Core 2019? One I've got highlighted. The 1809. Yeah, it's big, long, humongous file name. And that should be under C drive, under ISO. Everybody installed the initial 2019, so that should be in your folder. Everybody find it? Anybody still looking? Just go ahead and hit OK on to open that. And we'll just go ahead and next and finish. Now you see why I have 64 gig of RAM in these systems. I'm still not taxing it too bad. Using only 20 gig of RAM. Not bad yet. We keep growing though, so. It's worse when I have security class and LAN class at the same time, and we get a lot of servers going. Go ahead and go to settings. Do you remember we changed the processor? Yeah, we added the processor, we bumped it up to 2. And what did we do with memory? We set the maximum to 4096, just in case something goes haywire. with it. It's not ever going to consume more than 4 gig. And I changed the bottom end to 384. I doubt we'll hit much below 512 meg. I think server 2019 actually bottoms out around 600 something. 2016 will bottom out around 500 to 545 meg or something, but I'm going to give it the ability to use less if it wants to. The main one's the top number to worry with. That's the only 2 changes we did to the other ones. Go ahead and hit OK. You remember we had to connect and we had it spacebar when we started it pretty quickly. Otherwise, it would try to boot off the network and never would boot and install. So we're going to connect to it, hit the spacebar to boot from CD. Sometimes if you hit it too many times, it'll pop up a black screen menu and you just hit enter to continue on. If it doesn't launch the first time, there's this black square that you can turn off the virtual machine and then turn it back on to try to catch that space bar. So a little circle with a black square, we turn it off and turn it back on if you miss it. It's pretty easy to miss. It's like 1 second to 2 seconds that let you hit it. This is pretty much since Windows Vista. This is the same installer Microsoft's had since Vista, which is what, around 2006 timeframe. This was terrible, but at least they had an okay install. We go next, install, accept the license. Well, no, we got to pick the version. We're picking the standard, the top one, the recommended one this time. We're not making any changes, just next. Yep, I agree to the license agreement. And I think everybody remembered a custom install, I hope. There's nothing, it's a blank system. And you only got one drive, it's already selected, just next. Nick, what are you doing? Go back. Did you pick the top one?
No.
Yeah, you need to pick the top one. Yes.
Okay, I'll just do it.
Like I said, it can only be done at install time, so you'd have to reinstall if you pick the wrong one. And then do a custom. There's no upgrade. You never upgrade anything. Always install new, best practice. I have upgraded things before, but you're not supposed to. So now we have to wait for the long installation process. Although server core installs faster because it doesn't have to install the graphical interface junk into the system. And if you look on your screen, it's already rebooting and trying to boot up to server core. That was wicked fast. My system froze last time like this. Everybody else's is doing good. I had to turn mine off and turn it back on.
User's password must be changed.
Okay, there we go. Boot it up. I don't want to change my password. Cancel. Okay, all I can do now is Control-Alt-Delete. So I have 2 options. I can cancel, Or I can change my password. If I cancel, I just have to go back in to Control Alt Delete and then I have my two options again. If I cancel, I have one option, and that option is to Control Alt Delete. And then I get two options to either cancel or hit OK. So I should probably hit OK. And we'll use the pass 1, 2, 3, 4. And how do you get to another field? Can't click with the mouse. Tab. Arrow down also works, but
And then enter.
and then enter. Your password has been changed. And now I have a blinky cursor. I'm like, yay, how do I use Windows with the blinky cursor?
Type things. Type things.
So at this point, we're at the end of class in the first class. So I'm going to stop the recording. And we just closed down server 3. We're going to pick up on Friday.
No, that's